Good afternoon, and welcome to Acceleration Forum's first Digital Ecosystem Acceleration virtual seminar on sustainable digital transformation and ESG. Today's DXAF seminar is special in that it is held in collaboration with GSMA's ESG team from our London headquarters. Now, going forward, DXAF will be holding more virtual and physical seminars in conjunction with other GSMA programs and initiatives with aligned topical coverage. Digital transformation refers to the integration of digital technologies into all areas of business to fundamentally change how organization operates and delivers value to customers and partners. On the other hand, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, compliance is a set of standards that a company must meet in order to demonstrate its commitment to sustainable and responsible business practices. Whilst both digital transformation and ESG compliance can bring significant benefits to businesses and organizations, they can also create conflicts and misalignments. For example, a company may implement digital transformation initiatives that improve efficiency and reduce costs, but also increase energy consumption and carbon emissions, aka carbon footprint, potentially harming the environment and contradicting ESG goals. Similarly, ESG compliance may require certain business practices that conflict with the digital transformation activities or initiatives or strategy, such as using less automation or relying on manual processes to reduce the company's carbon footprint. To address these conflicts, companies need to carefully balance their digital transformation efforts with their ESG goals. This requires a holistic approach to business strategy that considers the impact of technology on all aspects of the organization, including its environmental, social, and governance practices. So companies must also be transparent about their efforts to address these challenges and communicate their progress to stakeholders, including investors, customers, partners, and employees. Ultimately, by aligning digital transformation and ESG compliance, companies can create a more sustainable and responsible businesses that delivers value to all stakeholders. So, to ensure that digital transformation initiatives are aligned with ESG principles, many organizations, including MNOs, mobile operators, are eagerly trying to make take a more responsible and sustainable approach. So in this seminar, we will have industry-leading organizations from MNOs and digital ecosystem vendors to truly innovative startups and key investors share their experiences and thoughts related to how they are aligning or helping to align sustainable digital transformation and ESG compliance. That said, first, before we start off, I'd like to invite the head of GSMA APAC, Julian Gorman, to just say a few words and to welcome you. Julian, over to you.
Thanks, Johnny. On behalf of the GSMA, welcome to this webinar on sustainable digital transformation and ESG. I'd just like to highlight, the webinar's intent is really to explore the relationship between digital transformation and the mobile industry and ESG metrics. For background, the mobile industry has become an integral part of our daily lives, not only for the people on this call who live and breathe mobile technology in our work, but also for society in general. And it has significantly transformed how we interact with the world. From making phone calls, sending text messages, to accessing the internet, using social media, mobile technology has revolutionized how we communicate and then we consume information. And that's really where we see ESG comes in. ESG is becoming increasingly important in the mobile industry as consumers and investors demand more transparency and accountability. Environmental concerns such as climate change, e-waste are becoming more pressing. Mobile companies are under pressure to reduce their carbon footprint, adopt more sustainable practices. We have social issues such as data privacy and human rights and diversity, and are also coming under scrutiny across the ecosystem. And mobile companies need to ensure that they are operating in a socially responsible way. The mobile industry must seek to ensure its sustainability and use ESG to help users, investors, and the industry understand its impact. Mobile broadband is now the critical infrastructure for economic growth and development, highlighting the importance of mobile industry's ESG metrics as a foundation of sustainability across the economy. And this is why the GSMA initiated a project to create an ESG white paper in last year, and I'm sure you're going to hear more about that later. to give you a perspective, this morning I spent an hour on a call with a digital advertising company, and they were talking about how they're building into their platform, how you can measure for each individual ad served to you on a website, the carbon footprint, and providing opportunities how to offset that. And that's just a very small part of the big ecosystem which mobile technology is supporting. So in conclusion, mobile data is the foundation of our digital economies, and ESG is becoming a critical factor in how we'll shape the future and sustainability of the mobile industry and the growth, therefore, of our digital economies. By prioritizing sustainability in the deployment and operation of the networks, we can create a more equitable and prosperous world for us all, as well as inviting incremental financial benefits to the industry, of which I'm sure you're going to talk about later. Finally, this is the first time GSMA has conducted such a webinar in APAC, and so I invite you all to actively participate by asking questions in the chat to speakers, but also to other participants. Use the opportunity to challenge, inquire, and research, because we're joined by expert speakers from across the region and GSMA in London as well. So take advantage of this occasion. We all benefit from taking a collective journey today in the same way that our industry and society will benefit from taking a collective digital transformation journey. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed today's webinar.
Thanks, Julian. Great. That's it. Now I'd like to invite my colleague, Tim Hatt from GSMA Intelligence, to really set the background to this seminar by sharing GSMA Eyes presentation on Green is Good for Business, covering global trends on digital transformation and sustainability. Now, Tim is Head of Research at GSMA Intelligence based in London. So Tim, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Johnny, for having me, and great to see you all here. I'm just going to host my screen here. Full screen mode. So I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes and bring in some points from research we've been doing over the last few months, a few pieces of research actually. And really in this context of sustainable digital transformation, talk about the sort of financial implications for the telco sector of why it's financially beneficial to go green. I think that the climate imperative has always been clear. Really since the Paris Accord in 2015, which is ratified by almost every country in the world, that this is the challenge of our generation. I could put up data from the UN or from various other bodies, climate scientists showing that, but it's not needed because it's indisputable. This is actually showing consumer survey data just from around Christmas time this year, where you can ask people what they see as the major challenges in the world now and in the future. And you can see, climate change is by far and away the leader. There are, of course, others, but this sort of sets the scene for how we do things in life as we do things in business. But I think it's also key to understand that, within the mobile telecom broader telecom sector, because many operators are integrated, that there is a long-term growth challenge. And if you look at the sort of past 20 years of industry performance, which is what this chart is showing, this is a European view, but you would see this in other regions as well. The CapEx cycles required to lay the networks that the industry and all of the communications that we all depend on require, are not being compensated for by, revenue growth. And so that kind of teal line, the turquoise line of, you can see those spikes going up for, every 10 years for 3G and then 4G and then most recently 5G networks. But in contrast, that red line is the change in revenue. And it's really not since the 3G era, like 20 years ago, that it's been going up. It's been going down or flat. And so there is this question of how do we look at re-engineering growth in some way, shape, or form? And we think that sustainability is a big part of that. So let me talk about, obviously this is quite a short presentation. We could talk about this for a long time, but I just want to set the scene. Let me talk about the costs first and then the revenue implications. So we talk a lot now from the cost side about the need to get energy costs down and energy usage down. You know, what we're showing here is sort of how you think about this in a holistic way, because you have, when you're a telco operator or another infrastructure business in the communications sector, you have competing interests. Energy is still about 30% of OPEX for an average operator. So it's a very significant cost line. And as 5G starts to scale and data traffic continues to rise, you know, pressure will continue to be put on that. Now we think about trying to get that down holistically. So it's really a combination of investing in more energy efficient network equipment, which is a big area of focus in the industry at the moment. It's about retiring older generations of network like 2G and 3G that are more energy intensive, and fundamentally the shift to renewables. So there are many facets at play here about how to get costs down. I mentioned that, I just thought I'd briefly put this in. We are actually tracking energy consumption across the telco sector, and we've done it for 2 years now. And I think some of you on this call have been great participants. Your organizations have been great participants to this. We have a separate report that we just published, and it's linked on the last slide, which shows the progression that the industry overall is making on its energy efficiency. And we're going to be running this again later in the year. So if you are interested in you're a mobile operator in that, please get in touch, and we're happy to have you as a participant. I talked about the renewable pathway. Clearly that is fundamental. But as you can see here, the point of this chart is to show there's a huge amount of regional disparity. Right now, about 20% of energy usage in the industry comes from renewables on average. But Europe is the global leader by some margin. And then you have sort of a fast changing environment in the US and some parts of Asia. But where you want to be is in that top right of the chart, whereas most people are still most countries are still down towards the bottom. So there's a huge development in the renewable energy sector, both in terms of accessing it, and increasingly we're seeing operators actually play in the energy market themselves, either by acting as a retailer of it to their own customers, or developing solar and wind farms on their own premises to generate their own energy, as well as investing in power purchase agreements. So kind of new business models at play. So that's a bit on the cost.
Excuse me, Tim. Just you're coming in and out. So maybe you could just try to speak clearly into the microphone, okay? Sorry to disturb you, okay?
Thanks for letting me know. Let me know if that cuts again. Just quickly on the revenues. So what we're looking at here is sort of the propensity for people to pay a premium for a telco, mobile phone service if they knew it was carbon neutral. And you can see here again from our survey data, whilst you can't take a direct read across through to pricing, people are willing to pay more. About 10 to 20% of people say they would pay up to 10% more, and an equal amount say they would pay more than that. Now, I think the question is how this comes to a product reality where operators can actually set this up to be in the retail stores and the online channels, and have the assurance that services are actually carbon neutral. But again, a big area of focus. Revenues on the enterprise side don't often get talked about, but if you look at ICT technology and 5G networks and IoT, all of that has a very beneficial impact on energy efficiency for enterprise clients. We did some modeling last year, which if you looked at this in aggregate for these 4 industries, manufacturing, power, transport, and buildings, these 4 industries take up about 80% of the global CO2 footprint. But ICT technology, mobile and ICT technology, can account for about 40% of the CO2 reductions needed over the next decade to stay on track for net zero. So that's a really big, important finding, which says that it's not just about the productivity gains from digital transformation, but it's combining that with the energy reductions. And so this is a really super important, competitive selling point as operators and their partners continue to sell into the enterprise through this digitization wave. The last thing I'll mention before handing over is around the circular economy. This is a still nascent part of the discussion, and it has many different elements. One part close to where the telco business model is device recycling. Obviously, in the past, most devices have not been recycled, despite the metal value within the device and other componentry which can be reused in the manufacturing life cycle. But really, only about 5 to 10% of mobile phones are actually recycled now. And that's lower in a lot of places. And so you can see within this graph, these are the highest volume smartphone areas of the world, but getting that up offers a way to shorten the replacement cycle for operators. So to get people upgrading more often, as well as obviously the beneficial environmental impacts of having more recyclability built into devices. So we're looking a lot at this. I know we're in discussions with a lot of you as well, which is great. And I think that will be key to watch. Last thing here, last thing, where we look at sort of the product strategy, this is just showing that if people are willing to pay and enterprises are willing to pay for green certified products, be that carbon neutral or other certification, really there's some catch up to do in having those at the ready. And you can see this is, again, survey data where we asked companies, are they offering certain products to the consumer segment or the enterprise? So this is really kind of the point is there is a demand for green products out there. It's only partially being fulfilled. As that starts to transition through in the coming decade, well, less than that, really 4 to 5 years, there's a major business opportunity for that. Okay, these are some links which you can look at in your own time to some of the research I was talking about. I'd encourage you to take a look. And if you have any questions after, please do get in touch. But Johnny, I'll hand back to you.
Great, thanks for a great presentation, Tim. Fantastic. If you have a look at the chat box, my colleague Kevin will also be sharing those links with you in the chat box for the audience out there. Now, next I'd like to invite another colleague of mine from London. Her name is Anne Euler, and she'll share the latest update on GSMA's ESG metrics for mobile. Now, Anne is Director of Sustainability at GSMA and heads up our ESG initiative. So, Anne, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the colleagues for setting the scene so far. I know we had a few issues with audio. I hope you can all hear me okay. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Fantastic. Great. Good news. Thank you. So yes, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm the Sustainability Director at the GSMA. So I work with probably quite a lot of you on the line on a lot of different things relating to sustainability. So I thought I'll just, briefly show all the other things that we do before I talk specifically about the ESG initiative. So, we obviously, as you have seen from my colleague Tim's presentation, there is so much that our industry can do when it comes to sustainable digital transformation. So we believe that we are uniquely placed to impact society and to be a leader on ESG issues. So within a lot of different parts of the GSMA, but also specifically within our sustainability and ESG program, we look at many different areas of incorporating sustainability into the core business through operating responsibly, demonstrating impact and accelerating leadership. So without going into too much detail here, I just wanted to show a brief overview of all the other things that we do. If anybody has got any questions on some of these other areas, we'll be sharing some links to the website, but also please don't hesitate to get in touch with me or any of the other colleagues who can put you in touch with myself. I'm happy to talk about some of these details as well. But specifically today, because I think it fits really well with the wider theme of this discussion, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the ESG metrics for mobile and the work that we've done over the last 18 months or so, and the white paper that we've published last summer. Before I go into the detail, for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with it, a little bit of an overview of kind of the current state of ESG. So, you know, there are about 600 global ESG reporting standards, with which, you know, by any means is a lot for companies to try and get their head around and try to comply with, and to decide what's important and what's not important. But at the same time, you know, mobile operators and obviously the wider ecosystem, and I think society at large at the moment, is really focused on ESG, and everyone realizes that, you know, putting a greater focus on it can really strengthen relationship with stakeholders and also create great value. I think a really important group are out there that, you know, are also asking more and more questions, which are investors, and they really now are putting a strong emphasis on, you know, ESG performance, and that it has, you know, a direct impact on their recommendations. So I think, you know, the world out there has fundamentally shifted, but there is also still quite a bit to do. Sticking with investors for a moment, because that was one of the people that we've, you know, spoken to, and it also really shows that, you know, they want to know whether important ESG business issues, you know, are being dealt with. They evaluate whether there are extensive and meaningful metrics in place. And they also really want to know whether board has direct oversight of ESG performance. So I guess I've alluded to it a little bit, but what's the problem? So I think there are quite a few problems out there that we saw before we started this initiative. So as I said, there are about 600 standards out there, which, you know, causes a lot of confusion. It causes a lack of alignment. It causes really a lot of work for, you know, our members in the industry to try and comply with a whole load of things that, you know, might later on turn out to not necessarily be crucial or material or fundamentally important. So what did we do? Well, the objective was to create industry alignment and respond to the need for more effective approaches to measuring and communicating ESG performance for the mobile sector. So in 2021, we created a working group of MNOs representing about 45% of the world's mobile connection. And we worked together with EY, the University of Yale, various investors, regulators, standard setters, and we developed a framework of 10 core industry-specific and actionable KPIs, which we released in last summer. So we base it all around that there is a set of general KPIs that we refer to, which the World Economic Forum has published, that we kind of say, it doesn't matter what business you are in, it doesn't really matter exactly what you do. These are the KPIs that you should be following anyway. But at the same time, there are also some industry-specific KPIs that we as an industry think are really, really important, and that, you know, are the focus areas that cut through this like alphabet soup out there of 600 standards. So for the purpose of this call, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I really wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what these KPIs are and what these areas are that we are covering. Julian mentioned some of them earlier. So there is the environment, where we look at emissions. You know, we ask the question of, you know, do you have a science-based target in place? And, you know, we ask to report on scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. We look at energy consumption, which is some of the things that obviously Tim talked about a little while ago, and where there is a lot of movement and, you know, a lot of things that the industry is currently doing. But we also look at waste. Again, Tim talked about it, you know, an area where there is work to be done, but it's certainly something that, you know, we see as material, and therefore, you know, operators are reporting on. Digital inclusion, Again, a wide variety of topics that, under this heading, from network coverage to affordability, as well as digital skills. And then, of course, really important for us, and as digital transformation continues becoming more and more crucial, digital integrity, data protection, digital rights for everyone's life online safety. There is a specific subcategory around children and vulnerable people. As we all spend our life online more and more, I think this is becoming more and more crucial. And then there's obviously the supply chain, which feeds into some of the aspects that we've heard about earlier around devices, but also sustainable procurement and policies and how you source. So those are the areas that we are covering. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we've done or are doing since we've published. And again, if there are any if there are any colleagues or any operators out there who'd like to know more, or who are working to implement some of these KPIs, I'd love to have a conversation. So we've been through a pilot process since the autumn, where we've piloted the framework with about 17 operators. So we've had discussions as people are trying to implement them and are kind of grappling with some of the more detailed methodology that sits behind all of this, and have kind of asked, what some of the issues are, and we will probably publish an updated framework following this. We are engaging very much with the wider ecosystem, talking to investors about the new framework, and also policy makers, especially as there is so much change to reporting frameworks currently in the European Union, as well as in the US, which I think will very much spill over in other parts of the world. And obviously, following the release and the pilot process, we're now seeing adoption as the new reporting cycle is coming. So Telefonica has become the first operator to reference the metrics in their 2022 integrated annual report, which they published last month. And we know, as other operators are about to publish their reports, sustainability annual integrated reports, that there is a lot more to follow. So that was a brief whistle-stop tour. As I said, I'm happy to answer a lot more questions, but I'll stop there and hand back to my colleagues.
Thank you, Anne. I hope everyone in the audience, managed to understand. It was very, very short. It was, for me, it was informative, very, very short. But if you need additional information, or if you'd like to reach out, please reach out to us via the chat, or even directly to any of us at GSMA, and we will connect you to Anne. Okay, and thank you very much once again. Great. So we've got good movement now. So next, having set the background, now I'd like to invite a digitally leading mobile operator from Northeast Asia, namely Japan, KDDI, to share how it's aligning ESG and digital transformation strategy. The presentation will be delivered by Kaz Yamashita, and who is the Senior Director and also an attorney at law, responsible for Sustainability Management Division at KDDI. So Kaz, the screen is yours. Can you hear me? Maybe you're on mute, Kaz. I think maybe you're still on mute, Kaz. Yeah, you're on mute. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
now
sorry about that.
That's over.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, Kaz.
All
over
right.
to you. Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
but thank you, Johnny, for your kind introduction. So I'm Kaz Yamashita, being in charge of KDDI Sustainability Business Management. It is my great honor to have this opportunity, and sincerely appreciate for taking part in my important session. Today, I'd like to talk to you about your activities toward the carbon neutrality, that is zero CO2 emissions, in KDDI Group. Okay. Before talking about the zero emissions, so let me introduce briefly about the mid-long-term perspective from the sustainability point of view. So recently, KDDI Group have revised and launched 6 new material issues to promote our sustainability business strategy. And we set 25 KPIs, of which we are now working on to achieve in the fiscal year 2024. So on the right-hand side, so you can see there's some example from the target related to the DX, the industry and the infrastructure, and the carbon neutrality. So one thing that I want to tell you is that the result of the KPI accomplishments are linked to the director's remuneration and employees' bonus in order to give them an incentive to pursue it. So now I'd like to focus on one of our materiality lineups, carbon neutrality, which, needless to say, it is a big issue on the global climate change. So here, last year, we released a plan for acceleration of its carbon neutrality timetable and for achieving the 0 CO2 emissions in its business activities by fiscal year 2030. So prior to this, we aim to achieve net zero emissions at our worldwide data centers under the Telehouse brand by fiscal year 2026. Then finally, KDDI Group as a whole aims to carbon neutrality by fiscal year 2050. In fact, KDDI emits approximately 1 million tons of CO2 annually through the energy consumption, such as electricity, which is equivalent to about 400,000 average household in Japan. Of this amount, so 98% is attributable to electricity used at the base stations, communication stations, and data centers. And it's expected to increase further with the spread of the 5G and increase in the data traffic volumes. Therefore, in order to achieve the carbon neutrality in 2030, KDDI will take various measures to reduce the power consumption at those facilities and the use of renewable energy. Okay, this is just slide, just explains the interim target of the Telehouse data centers carbon neutral, as I mentioned. Telehouse located in Europe have already accomplished the carbon neutral in other regions, followed by fiscal year 2026, which I believe is the fastest target as a whole brand in the data center industry. So to achieve the carbon neutrality, electric power saving of our telecom infrastructure and effective use of the renewable energy are essential. With a slide, so I would like to introduce a few of our efforts on electric power saving for our telecom facilities. So heat protection from IT devices is increasing due to high performance and high density, along with the recent active needs of the cloud service. Now the issue is huge heat waste generated from them. To solve the problem, we are studying the availability of advanced liquid immersion systems. On the right-hand side, you can see as an innovative means to cool the IT equipment. In a trial, we succeeded the 94% effective reductions of the power consumption for cooling the servers. So we are aiming to launch this in 2023, this year. And right-hand side shows the new power saving functions we have just added at the base stations from this March. We will smartly manage to put it on the sleep mode while securing the customer's stable communication. We found about the 30% power consumption reduction in a trial. Okay, so this is another type of effort we have launched in the fiscal year 2022 internal carbon pricing, ICP, in the sustainability corporate bond. As for the ICP, an internal price on the carbon prices and a monetary value on greenhouse gas emissions, which the company can then factor into the investment decisions and the business operations. ICP set a carbon price at the 14,000 yen, slightly above the $100 US per ton. With this, we gave each business unit an incentive to shift the investments to low carbon alternatives. It also helps to achieve our greenhouse gas target, address shareholders' concerns about the disclosure, build resilient supply chains, to gain the competitive edge, and show the corporate leadership. And right-hand side, as you see it on the we have issued a new financial framework, the sustainability bond, in October 2022. This is to promote and support sustainable business management from the financial point of view. The size of the fund is 100 billion yen. And we expect that this framework will be used for mainly the 5G related investment and the other activities widely related to resolving the social issues, including the global climate change. So this slide shows a new business of the renewable energy generation. The effective use of the renewable energy is one of the key factors for KDDI Group's net zero accomplishments from now on. Our subsidiary, AU Energy Holdings, you can see it on the center of the sheet, established a new company in the last January, aiming to the launch of the renewable energy generation business. The company started the business from the first coming in April. The company considers not only direct supply of the generated energy to KDDI's own facilities, but also substantial contribution to carbon neutrality of the society in Japan. Okay. Furthermore, so we have a corporate venture link specializing in the carbon neutral and the circular economy. So let me introduce this briefly. The name of the corporate venture capital is KDDI Green Partners Fund. Toward the startup working on a climate tech, we plan to invest about 5 billion yen, shortly below the US $40 million in total in 5 years. By utilizing this nice vehicle and using their technologies and plenty of KDDI's recruit assets together, so we further would like to promote and contribute to proactively for serving the various social issues we're facing, and of course, and including the energy saving. So last slide. So through our activities, as I explained, so we have obtained the offshore approval on a science-based target for climate action. Further, so we are newly included in the A list of CDP last year, the highest rank as the advanced enterprises working on environmental saving. So these evaluation indexes are encouraged that the GSMA Climate Action Task Force, in which the KDDI has been actively involved. So KDDI keeps contributing to this as one of the members of the GSMA and as a global corporate citizen with great responsibility. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Kaz. Thank you for a very, very interesting and very informative presentation. I'm sure the audience have found it very, very interesting as well. It never ceases to amaze me because with KDDI, KDDI has always been a leader in digital transformation of itself and also its partners. But on top of that, on the ESG front and the sustainability front, again, they are also leading a lot of the other MNOs in showing leadership as to reaching, carbon zero, earlier than, I suppose, expected. It's good to see KDDI leading the way. Thanks again, Kaz. Thank you. Fantastic. All right. Having heard from the digitally leading mobile operator KDDI, next I would like to invite a leading ecosystem vendor in the telecom sector, Cineverse Technologies, to share its experience and initiatives related to ESG and digitally transforming networks. We have actually two speakers from Cineverse. We have David Hassman and Julie Fairbrother joining us from the US and the UK, respectively. David is Vice President of Strategy and Julie is Senior ESG Manager at Cineverse Technologies. David will start the presentation. So over to you, and thank you for joining this seminar so early in your morning, David. Over to you, mate.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me, Johnny. All right, bear with me while I bring up the slides here. All right, so hopefully everybody can see that. So today, I'm going to talk, just a little bit about, high-level things about ESG and networks in general, and then I'm going to turn it over to Julie to talk specifically about what Cineverse is doing in ESG. So the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, I'm sorry, released a report last year that I thought showed some very interesting data around ESG. First, there was a statistic they showed that companies that were embracing their ESG goals were actually more successful in their digital transformations than companies that weren't prioritizing ESG goals. And then when you started to dig down into some of that data, they kind of broke out what different industries were really prioritizing in terms of environmental, social, and governance in their ESG plans. And I think not surprisingly, especially based on a lot of the topics we talked about today, the telecom industry is prioritizing environmental over the two other ones. Not that they're not doing anything in social or governance, but certainly environmental is top of mind when telecom companies are going after that. Why that is, it could be multiple reasons. One is efficiency, but I think a big one of that is that was also kind of talked about is cost. Energy is a big cost to the mobile industry and the telecom industry in general. So there is both, environmental benefits of being more efficient there and also financial benefits. So I just thought it was very interesting when you looked at what telecom is focusing on against all companies in general. So digging in a little bit to, ESG and, different areas, not comprehensive areas, but certainly some areas of network transformation and how does that address ESG or relate to ESG. So for the first and foremost, as we just heard from KDDI, data center transformation. So this is a very large area, especially for the telco industry, and primarily addresses the E or the environmental in ESG. A lot of it is driven by government restrictions and regulations going forward in terms of, as new data centers get built, their footprint, their carbon footprint and things like that. But there's also technical things that are driving some of the data center transformation, especially cloud native architectures, driving efficiency in these designs. Next is kind of applied infrastructure and applying DevOps as companies and telcos go through their telco transformation. So this addresses a couple of areas, certainly environmental and also government. I think at the top of the presentation, we heard from GSMA where, where we look at new things like software-defined infrastructure, right? There's kind of a push and a pull here. There's some efficiency gained as we, put in some of these new infrastructures, but also we need to consider some of the power requirements here, because as we kind of separate the infrastructure on a power and hardware standpoint, we kind of decouple that, and from a power standpoint, not quite as efficient. So we need to kind of have a balance there. Obviously, 5G, an incredible driver in ESG from a number of aspects, certainly from environmental in the power consumption aspects as we deploy the new architectures, but also from a governance perspective as some of the security efforts get involved there. Environmental, IoT, smart cities, things like that 5G is creating. But even I would even push that also over to the social, the S, with these networks are more widely deployed in digital inclusion, more access to the internet. I think some of the fixed wireless applications that we're seeing early on in 5G is getting, good high-speed broadband to people that couldn't get it before. Moving on, security and privacy. Obviously, a lot of governance is covered here, whether it's looking at cyber security and really kind of communicating that out, both in business and financial terms, to investors of companies on, what does a hack in an enterprise really mean, and why you have to, increase your cybersecurity for that. But also, there's also a huge issue around the security around personal data, and addressing, a lot of the social concerns there. And then finally, as we look at our digital transformations, the data, artificial intelligence, and analytics around that. Again, we heard from GSMA around all the different standards that are out there around ESG right now. But at the same time, we have this balance of getting those focused and into more direct ones. But also we have investors and other constituencies asking, what is really the quality of that data? How are you measuring those standards? Show me that, right? So there's a good data piece there. And then finally, AI. Obviously, there is a ton of uses for AI moving forward across social, governance, and environmental. But we have to be mindful and make sure we use AI in a very fair and responsible manner as we go forward. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Jilly, and she'll talk a little bit about what Cineverse is doing around ESG.
Thank you, David, and thanks everyone for having us this morning. We're just going to leave that slide there. Please don't sit and read through it. I'd rather you listen to what I say. So as David said, my name is Jilly. I lead our global ESG program for Cineverse. And I hear a lot on these webinars, things like, where does ESG fit in? Or how does this relate to ESG? And people, I think, are still thinking about ESG as this extra thing that you have to do. It's not. Look at the material issues on our ESG program, things that David talked about, like cybersecurity. In the other column, things like diversity, equity, inclusion, supply chain management. You're always asking as well, like, where do you put ESG in the business? Is it HR? Is it legal? Is it finance? Well, the answer to both of those questions, it's everything and it's everywhere. If you're performing well at ESG as a company, you're performing well as a business, and your ESG program essentially becomes a PR program. However, most of us need a little bit of work before we can get there. So this is the reason that I created Cineverse Rise, which is essentially our ESG program. But instead of having the acronym ES&G, which sort of feels like a little extra thing that people have to do or a tick box exercise, it's something that people get enthused behind and get involved in. So we have 4 pillars which span ES&G. We have responsibility, inclusivity, service, and the environment. Now, Anne spoke a little bit earlier about relevant KPIs for the industry and materiality. So how did we come up with this list of topics? Of course, we started with the standards that Anne mentioned earlier. There are many of them. We particularly looked at SASB and we looked at GRI. But in the second year of our ESG program, we wanted it to engage with all of our stakeholders. So instead of just picking ourselves what was relevant, we surveyed our customers, our investors, our employees, our leadership team, and our suppliers as well. So we could all agree on what was material for us. And each of these material issues comes with its own set of KPIs, which we track annually and we report on annually in our ESG reports. Now, environmental one's an interesting one for us, and I know it's the focus of today's webinar. Now, we are very asset low. We don't own any of our offices and we don't own any of our data centers. So when you think about scope 3, which is our supply chain emissions, that is where most of our environmental exposure is. So things like setting science-based targets are very difficult for a company like Cineverse because we don't even have one electricity contract. So it becomes a lot about supplier engagement. Of course, communicating your ESG program is also really important. And last year we launched our entire mandatory training for all of our employees to learn about ESG. So I just wanted to, I know it's quick and there's not much time today, so I just want to finish on a couple of highlights of things that we're doing in the environmental pillar. So we now have a global policy where 100% of our e-waste goes to a supplier with environmentally friendly standards. We updated our supplier code of conduct last year so we could start to introduce to our suppliers that we want them to align with our goals as well. We continue to report scopes 1, 2, and 3 to CDP. We've been doing that since 2019. Things on the social side that also relate to environment. We dedicated April 2022 as Earth Month, so we could start to reach out to our employees and see what maybe ideas they have, not only around how to save energy at home and in the office, but potentially what products we could start to develop that would have ESG benefits. And outside of green topics, I could talk about that all day long as well, things like supporting social causes or Girls Who Code, who help bring in a pipeline of female talent. And if you want to hear more about any of the other initiatives we have going on, we do have ESG reports on our website. And of course, I'm around to ask any questions as well. So thanks, Johnny, for having us.
Great. Thank you very much, Shelley. So it's good to see. I mean, I didn't realize how proactive you guys are, you know, in relation to, you know, ESG and sustainability. And we will make sure to if you can share any more information, we will make sure to share that with our audience post this seminar as well. But both thanks to both of you, David and Julie, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you. Great. So now we will now begin a panel discussion session with industry panel participants, diverse, sharing their perspectives around the theme enabling the digital transformation and embracing ESG. Now, for this panel discussion, we have 5 panel participants from different industries. First, we have Adeline Anthony. She's the head of group sustainability at the Axiata Group, which is a very large mobile telecommunications group in Malaysia. For those of you that aren't aware, we have Mr. Sukhjin Tang, a director of global programs from Border Global Center, which is a very active innovative startup accelerator based in Korea. We have Mr. Jason Park, who's a CEO of an innovative startup called Sesu AI. And Sesu AI provides an ESG compliance platform for enterprises. So it's I think he'll be able to share some really good insight as a startup. And we have Mr. Yong Kwon Koo, who's the president of Smilegate Investment, which is an LP, and it has its own ESG framework for investing into companies. And lastly, of course, we have Sunil Kumar Yadav from KPMG ESG, who's a director of sustainability services. These are 5 participants. We'll have a discussion around a number of questions that I'll be asking. First question will be, and Adele, I'd like to actually address this question to you first. I mean, obviously, from the previous presentations, we see that there are key challenges and there are a lot of obstacles that also need to be gotten over. So, what are some of the key challenges organizations face when implementing digital transformation strategies to really support their ESG objectives? I mean, your insight will be much appreciated. Adeline.
All right. I'll probably give it from 2 perspectives. I think number one, at least for most organizations, I think as you rightly pointed.
Oh, Adeline, you're gone mute. Gone mute.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. So I'll give this from 2 perspectives. One is a bit broad, and another one a little bit of a operational kind of example. So from a broader perspective, I think to the earlier speakers, it is clear that when it comes to ESG, it's all about data governance, the quality of the data, and really how do you integrate it across all segments of the organization. So in short, data is key. You need a lot of data. And again, there is that question of accuracy, how are we reporting? And I think the fact that the board now is also given a lot of importance to drive ESG practices within an organization, given the fact that they are very far from operations, they do need this data to enable them to make the right decisions or to really steer the company in a certain direction. So I think this is one big area where ESG is all about. But again, when you come to talk about collecting data, even from GSMA, when you have this entire set of indicators that you need to monitor, it's really about how do you get all this information and all this data in place. And again, if you have technology, it is awesome. If you can start using technology to enable this data to be reported online immediately, if there are certain AIs, which is there to help you to check for accuracy, it's great. Data is checked, approved at a certain level. So I think technology can help you to do that. But that's just one part of it. I'd also like to share more from an operational perspective. I think we spoke about this before, where previously, in one of the organizations that I was working with, which is not the telco industry, we had an online system where we could track really the energy usage in factories in different locations around the world. But the problem with that is that it also depends on the user. How well is the user understanding the system, the data? So sometimes if the system is down in certain location, if no one checks, no one updates it, then you will find that there is inaccuracy in data. At the user end, you also need to understand what are you looking at. Is it you can have so much of data, but what is good and what is bad is also something that you need to be able to understand. What is the benchmark? So I think when it comes to using technology within the organization, there are many facets, that you need to understand, and getting everyone on board and really making business sense out of this data is the challenge. And I think it's an area that a lot of organizations are looking into how we can improve further.
So proper availability of the technology, utilization of technology, making the most of that technology, creating awareness and education within the organization to ensure that that everyone within the organization are aware of the compliance requirements and so forth to be able to drive ESG compliance. Am I correct? I mean, would that be a good summary for you?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really quite interesting. I mean, so from a innovation or startup perspective, I mean, I think Adeline's actually pointed out a number of points there. I mean, so Jean, Mr. Chang, and then of course from CESU AI, from a startup and innovation perspective, how do you see that this question? How would you address this question and answer this question from a startup innovation perspective?
Thank you, Johnny. We've seen, of course, impressive applications of technology by KDDI and Cineverse Technologies. Also, I think Adelaide really clearly identified the key challenges faced by telcos in terms of following these ESG mandates and regulations. And one of my actually favorite quotes regarding ESG is that a penny spent in ESG is a penny spent towards a kind of world that we want to live in. So where do we spend the penny is really that question. I think the Borno Global Center, as the GSMA DXAF's innovation partner, has been actually very fortunate to have that mandate of matching, identifying and sourcing such technologies that enable global telcos to achieve those ESG purposes. And the list goes very, very long. We have AI-based technologies, Adeline mentioned big data-based technologies, AI. And the matter of the fact is, a lot of these technologies, of course, can be developed in-house, but there are also many existing startups and small and medium-sized enterprises that already have ready-made technologies that can be applied from day one. In addition to that, especially we're working with very developed economies, including Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, where 5G has already been laid out. So now we're talking about ESG, but at the same time, enablers of ESG technologies in terms of digital transformation. I'm very happy to see, for example, CESU AI, Johnny, as you mentioned, which is one of those examples of the enabling technologies that can be adopted, as I said, from day one by the telcos to really achieve these ESG goals in a very, very simple way. And we are happy to identify more technologies. We are here to connect the GSMA members with these innovative technologies and solutions. We also have some funding and grants that enable the formation of partnerships and joint ventures and POCs of these technologies by the GSMA member companies and MNOs. So, I think going back to your question, Johnny, it's a matter of really, having these players such as Bono Global Center playing that bridging role between the very, very big and busy MNOs and the very, very innovative startups that can provide the enabling technologies to achieve ESG goals. And I think I can move on to Sesu AI, which will be one of the examples of these enabling technologies.
Thank you,
Right.
Mr. Chang.
Yes, go ahead.
Allow
Go
me-
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so apologies. So that's great. So as an innovative startup, I mean, I would be really interested to hear your views about the key challenges regarding organizations facing, when implementing digital transformation to support the ESG objectives. So your thoughts would be great, Jason. Yeah.
Thank you. Allow me to share my thoughts and insight on how digitalization can enhance transparency in the renewable energy sector. The key factors here are visibility and trust. Digital transformation can significantly improve transparency in the renewable energy sector by leveraging technologies such as blockchain, AI, and IoT. These technologies can help monitor, track, and verify energy production, distribution, and consumption data in real time. This increased visibility can help stakeholders make informed decisions and ensure that the energy sector remains accountable for its environmental impact. Renewable energy platform can be utilized to provide consumers with clearer information about the origin of their energy through traceability solution. With Sesu RE100 platform, with the energy grid, consumer can access real-time data about the source of their electricity, whether it's from solar, wind, or other renewable resource. This empowers consumers to make informed choice and support renewable energy providers. Advanced data analytics and monitoring solutions can help identify inefficiency, optimize energy production and consumption, and reduce emission. By making this information available to regulator, investor, and consumer, digitalization can promote responsible practice and encourage the adoption of cleaner energy sources. Enhanced transparency and traceability in renewable energy contribute to overall growth of the industry by building trust among stakeholders. When energy providers can demonstrate their commitment to sustainable practice and ESG initiatives, investors are more likely to support them. Additionally, increased consumer awareness and demand for clean energy sources can drive the expansion of the renewable energy sector. So digital transformation has the potential to revolutionize the renewable energy sector by promoting transparency and traceability and accountability. As Sesu, we are dedicated to leveraging cutting-edge technology to drive sustainable development by utilizing consortium blockchain and IoT hardware and AI software to support ESG initiative. That is for the visibility and trust. Thank you.
Oh, great, Jason. I think that was a good explanation, but I think you jumped to the question 4 that I was going to ask you. But no, that was thank you very much for your comments. Now, just sitting on the original question on what are some of the key challenges organizations face when implementing digital transformation strategies to support their ESG objectives, I would like to actually ask a Smartgate investment to get an LP's perspective to that question. Mr. Koo, would you like to comment on this specific question, please?
Oh, I think your question is too difficult to answer, basically. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, right. Yeah.
Oh, as you know, basically the ESG trend is just upcoming. So it is very hard to evaluate the I can say the issues to the company and also the against the digital transformation. I think in usual case, basically most of the listed companies, ESG standard is based on the performance about their efforts to make the us more green and the environment good. So basically, it is very hard to connect with the digital transformation. But I think as the previous company Sesu AI did, and some innovative companies try to build up some new technologies based on AI and also some cutting edge technologies to develop more comprehensive systems to build up the evaluating ESG and also trying to build up more comprehensive system about the digital transformation, I think. But in the venture capital perspective, as you know, most of the startup company is their organization size is quite small, and they have quite a big vision, but their implementation capability is not enough to implement their vision. So we, as an investor or venture capital, we try to remind their some risks and also some missports. That kind of our funds effort. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Koo. We've heard from an LP investor. I'd like to actually reach out to Sunil, who is from a consulting company, to actually share his views on that specific question, and of course to follow up on that question. Another question, how can also companies engage stakeholders, including customers and investors, and their digital transformation and ESG efforts? If you can actually just comment on those two questions, it'd be great. Thanks. Sunil, over to you.
Thanks, David. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, so I was going through the panel's input and finding out what is common trend. So Adeline talked about data accuracy, reporting, and the views of technology to ensure that it became more energy efficient, or the whole system became productive. Mr. Chong talked about pennies spent on telecom technology, enabling technology to achieve ESG in a way. Jason talked about how can we bring trust, visibility, transparency into the whole renewable energy transformation and digital transformation, and utilizing AI and ML. And then Mr. Koo talking about the challenges of a small startup. How can we actually get into it? It's like very, very small. How can we utilize it? And so one thing which is a common theme which is coming out of is like, yeah, technology is important, and but at the same time, ESG is taking. The theme is ESG is a separate silo. Digitalization technologies are the separate silos. The key message I want to pass on is digitalization is a tool to achieve decarbonization or the ESG. So probably take this as a tool to achieve rather than just a two different silos. Second is whether it is a SME startup or a large organization. What I understand from the group is technology is available here and now, whether it is cloud-based or whether it is on-prem based, depending on we want to build, buy, migrate, where you want to go, how you want to move, things are available. The large challenge is basically the implementation, or do we have the right intentions rather than just ticking the mark on ESG, or really want to be inculcated. And I believe I quote the previous speakers, good for business and making the business which is good for good. And Senyu has talked about the overall value of ESG inside the business, because people who are compliant to ESG have performed better than compared to their peers, and that's something which comes out of the study BCG 2020 they talk about. So we all understand that, I mean, the companies who actually go for ESG compliance, they're bound to grow, or maybe they're actually perform better compared to the peers. And digitalization is actually making it all happens together. What fundamental challenge which I feel is basically we are still talking about in silos. It's my scope, it's your scope, it's their scope. I think we have to fundamentally take up responsibility of our own actions and ensure that we encourage others to be also part of the game. You being a mobile or a 5G or maybe largely on the network side, you have the equal influence on the data center. You have the equal influence on the back. I mean, say upside and front side, both side of the supply chain. I mean, even at the users, how they actually use your mobile or network to ensure that. I mean, I understand the sleep mode, you achieve 30% savings. It's end-to-end supply chain has to work together, and we have to encourage each other's. I mean, like, you have all the rights to go to data center that, okay, are you actually making your MSCs or your data center efficient to ensure that my mobile network work well, or encourage the users to put the sleep mode so that we can utilize better energy saving on the network. These are something which is, it cannot be solved in silos. And one thing which can actually make this whole silo into one platform is the digitalization, which I feel like is the real tool which comes out of the whole discussion from the panel. And that's my submission, David.
Thank you. I think you're really, again, I mean, it's a collaboration. It's a collaboration business model for all digital economies. You see, digital platforms and so forth. And I fully agree with your comment there. That leading on from that, I would like to actually ask a leading ecosystem vendor, David, or maybe Jilly, to actually get your comments about what Sunil just mentioned as well as a key ecosystem vendor. David.
Yes, so I think Sunil covered a lot. They're in very well, right? I mean, there is a lot of silos out there today. So interesting within Cineverse, both myself and Jilly, we report up through the CFO organization. So while Jilly has a broad scope of ESG, it's very aligned with not only the strategy that we do, but also being part of the CFO organization, making sure that we have the right metrics, we have the right data tracking and all of that. And then ultimately, that's I think that Julia was talking about. That's both communicated inside, to the employees and getting the employees involved, but also the investors of Cineverse, the other constituencies of Cineverse, our suppliers and our partners. And it is very complex because everybody, wants to do it, but again, all the competing technologies and but I think the digital transformation is a good kind of rallying point that can get people around and move it forward.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think, I mean, we actually created our own in-house data tool for ESG. So it's aligned with our FP&A tool, and it's where we keep all of our data and metrics. And the challenge with that is automation. As I mentioned before, we don't own any energy contracts. So if we want to find that data, we will always have to go to a third party or even a fourth party to find that data. So automation definitely becomes a challenge for us when it comes to greenhouse gas reporting, for sure.
Right. And I'll go back to you, Adeline. I mean, obviously you brought up the key topic, okay, and we've actually come this far in terms of discussions. So in terms of, I mean, within Axiata Group itself, you as the sustainability head, for example, do you see the compartmentalization or the silo effect within that organization as well? Yes or no? Or for example, how are you actually getting over that hurdle as well? Yeah.
It's there and it's not. I think slowly as we progress, we're getting past that hurdle. But I think I think there are two important things that's required. One is a very clear framework in terms of where you want to go as an organization. Because when you communicate that, then every different moving part will start thinking about, what can I do to be part of that change? And I think the other bigger thing that you need to have is really clear targets and goals. So it's when you have that, it's only then that, everyone is looking in a particular direction, also guided by a certain milestone or a certain time that you need to achieve something. So I think these are the two critical elements that you need to have. A framework. I think even when Jilly presented just now, she had a clear framework. The 4 ESG pillars, spelled out. And in addition to that, is really the targets. And I think to really make it work, it's also that element. I think even one of the speakers just now mentioned that these targets need to be linked to KPIs and KPIs links to remuneration. So I think these are the elements that needs to be there to really move the entire organization in the same direction towards a single agenda or a single goal. So we're getting there, but I think the good news is that a lot of people are aware that this is something that you have to do. You don't need to kind of like preach ESG. I think everyone knows that this is something that needs to be done, but how to do it, how much do I need to do? I think that is where targets, goals, frameworks, strategies help everyone to function.
Great. Well, I mean, I'd like to actually look at this from an investor's perspective, right? So, Mr. Koo, I mean, obviously you mentioned, I mean, I know that Smartgate is an LP investor, and I also understand that you have an ESG framework that you base your investment on. Would you like to just share that with the panel and the audience here, please?
Basically, our ESG investment criteria is not our own investment criteria. Basically, the criteria is developed by Ministry of SME and startups, and also one of Korean venture fund of funds called by KB developed that investment criteria, and also basically that investment criteria is supports the SMEs to nurture their ESG capability for the next generation. And basically, it is there are so many evaluation criteria relating ESG, but it is basically it is 3 steps. One is the early stage company. There are only 11 investment questions, and also the next step is it is about 40, and the next level is around 80 questionnaires. And based on that questionnaire, we evaluate their ESG risks and also status. So based on that score, we make a investment decision for the startup companies. That's the current status. Basically, it is very hard to, as the other speakers said, that it is very hard to connect with the ESG and the digital transformation, but we try to kind of some efforts to connect those kind of things in the investment criteria. That's the current status.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Koo. Jin, I mean, obviously, as an accelerator, matchmaking startups and introducing startups to, for example, key MNOs and other enterprises, large enterprises, and so on. And we identified that there needs to be a continuous collaboratory link. Okay, a flow of recognizing and enabling ESG. Okay, from one company or one a department to another. So how do you actually go about introducing, for example, startups, between different countries or different companies and so on, keeping in mind that the ESG compliance that needs to be kept for the respective companies and startups?
Great question, Johnny. And really going back to what our panelists mentioned, let me give you a very tangible case study that we are working on right now. So there's a startup that actually, and we're talking about silos, this startup will let a company upload all the data, answer a set of questionnaires, and it will reformat the data based on AI and big data so that it will comply with one of those, I think GSMA mentioned over 300 standards that this company wants to publish their ESG reporting to. So coupled with this technology, and of course, companies like Sezu that's providing blockchain-based, verifiable and transparent renewable energy usage data for these reporting purposes. These packages of technologies can then be adopted by a larger company that is looking towards publishing their ESG report. So it's really identifying key challenges that all the panelists mentioned. And to be very honest with you, the challenges are very obvious and they are out there. The key is really to work with our innovators in the ecosystem to say, look, adopt your technology towards this ESG purpose, and let's see how the larger companies take it and apply it to achieve those ESG objectives. I think last but not least, I think the DXAF is very appropriate that you've selected the theme ESG, because we think that ESG should be an enabler for DX. It shouldn't be a burden or a challenge, but an enabler. And I think to do that, one of the key, directions that this DXAF should go towards would be the de facto standardization of the MNOs and the ESG objectives, so that we set the standard together in terms of what are the things that MNOs should focus on to achieve ESG purposes. Because to be honest with you, there is no standard yet.
Well, great. I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I saw you, Sunil, just nodding away like that, okay? So I would like to actually get your a consultant's view of, for example, in addition to what Sakjin mentioned, I'd like to get your views in terms of how to go about, addressing this as well.
I think a few things is correctly mentioned by Mr. Chang. I mean, this is part of it. I mean, and that's what we at KPMG also trying to position, that ESG, you have to first get the intention right. And we have to start believing that ESG, when we incorporate, it's not only ESG strategy, it became the business growth strategy.
Yeah.
And we take things directions from there, and then inculcated not only from the reporting perspective or disclosing perspective, which is important, the governance is important, but ensuring that we make this enabler. I believe I like the word enabler, and Mr. Chang mentioned that. This is actually an enabler to grow your business, change something which you are doing wrong in a way. I mean, it's an opportunity to reflect and move on to the right perspective. So at KPMG, we are trying to help our customer and anything and everything. And if you talk about everything would one day will have standards, yes, maybe. And some of these things will be probably left on common sense in the end of the day. Frankly speaking, all this problem ESG, they were not the problem 200 years back. This is human created problems. We created, I mean, all of us, I mean, the environment issues or the social issues or the governance issues, but we have now, it's largely our own issues 200 years back we started, and now it's time to correct and reflect. Some of those has standards, some of those should probably we bring common sense and we start from there, and then we move into the standard and global standard and other side. So one of the speakers talk about there are 600 global standards of reporting. I mean, like one side we say we don't have standard, on the other side we got 600 standards. So I believe the real answer is somewhere in between. We need to really get into the right shape, and then bringing more with one common intention or correct intention. Like, for example, if you're driving, you are wearing seat belt not to, to save yourself rather than to avoid tickets. So I think that's a direction which we have to inculcate into the organizations, that ESG is not to avoid ticket. It is for your own safety, and so that you can run faster, you can grow, you can win, and that's the whole thing, enabler rather than a challenge or restrictions. That's the technology.
Great. Thanks, John. I mean, digital transformation and ESG, they do go hand in hand. I think
they are
actually over the long run.
They have to merge.
Complementary, yeah, very, very complementary, yeah, as well. And maybe you could call me ignorant, but in the telecommunications technology sector, we actually have 3GPP as a standard body. Okay, correct. Maybe we should create ESGPP or something like that, that everything's aligned. Okay, but yeah. So look. I think we've got 2 minutes left, but thank you very much for your participation, panel discussions. Really appreciate it. I hope the audience found the discussion and the presentations helpful. Would anyone like to actually mention, have last comment? Okay.
Yeah, David,
Sunil,
before we move, one kind of message probably, if I can give. No matter what we're doing on technology, we keep growing renewable energy, and renewable energy is not coming from universe. We are actually, digging the earth, making silicon, and actually making solar panel and all that, and maybe wind and all that. So this all come with the embedded energy. If I have to pass one message, what I will feel is like we have to get into the habit of responsible consumption and responsible generation. Energy is such a commodity. Whatever you produce, it can consume, or however you produce, it will continue to get consumed. We will find something or other to consume. I think if one common message, I believe we can, and especially for the mobile and network, and probably continue to increase, we really need to see, do we really need all those? AI, do we really need that much? And where we are actually utilizing AI. So responsible consumption and responsible generation is something which this is my key message, David.
Fantastic, thank you. So yeah. So make sure, after this virtual seminar, when you leave the office, make sure you turn off your computers. Okay, but look, thank you very much. Look, the time's up now, but I hope this 90 minutes was at least some helpful for everyone in the audience and the panel discussion to get a different perspective in terms of connecting digital transformation and ESG. From DXAF's perspective, this is the first virtual seminar. Next virtual seminar will be at the end of May. The date will be set, in the next few weeks, and the topic for that seminar will be slightly different to ESG, but it will be on enabling the metaverse, digital ID, fintech, and security. Okay, so I think that's going to be a very, very interesting virtual seminar. So I hope you can all join us. Regarding any questions that you have, please leave comments in the chat box, and we will try to get back to you with answers as best we can. But once again, thank you very much for your participation, Adeline, Sakjin, Jason, Mr. Koo, Sunil, David, and also Jilly. But my biggest thanks to David, because I know that it's bloody early in the morning back in the States, but thank you again very much for your participation, everyone. Have a good one. Turn off your computers and see you again in a couple of months. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.